Hello Cobra fam, welcome back to yet another video. In this video, let's zoom out here a bit. I want to cover a few different charts. I want to start here on Bitcoin on the weekly. I want to take a look at the previous bull run, the reason why we've been paying attention to this macro pitchfork that we've been having here, kind of reflect what kind of state the market is in right now, because I see there's a lot of confusion, a lot of confusion here. People don't know if they should be bullish, if they should be bearish. So I want to share kind of my macro view again, because I feel like I haven't done that in a long time. So let's start with that. Then of course we can take a look at the stock market. Stock market is having a very nice bounce here today. So I still feel bullish here. I'm feeling extremely bullish here on Bitcoin. And before I tell you why, let's zoom out here a bit, because I know you guys think I'm a perma-bull here. I've been bullish here for a long time while Bitcoin has been going down. But if we actually look at the macro data, it does seem bullish still. But let's first jump here on the weekly analysis, then sooner we're going to jump into the daily here and we can discuss more why I still feel bullish here and take a look at the stock market. But let's start here on the weekly chart. So this is the Bitcoin CFD chart. So if you come here on TradingView, you go to Bitcoin against dollar. This is not a Bitstamp or Coinbase. This is the OANDA chart it's called. So this is basically contract for difference. So it's a specific type of contract. This market is not 24/7. So that's why if you zoom in here, you will see gaps here, I believe, because the weekends are excluded. That's why you will see these gaps here in the market. So this is a CFD type of chart. This is a chart I used for Bitcoin to predict the previous bull market top. So when you use this chart here on the weekly time frame, all you have to do is pull the pitchfork here from the lows to the bull market top and to the bear market lows. And the pitchfork I started using was the modify shift here. So if we use the modify shift looking at the previous bull market, we can see this median line acted as perfect top here on Bitcoin. And that's basically after if you had exited at the median line, you basically would have sold the top. Then of course Bitcoin made a slight more high here, but ideally wanted already have exited the median line before then Bitcoin entered a bear market. So we can see here algorithms use this pitchfork highly accurately, especially if you zoom in here. We can even zoom in here on the daily time frame. We can see here how beautiful we got these wicks here. We actually got 3 touches, so 1, 2, 3, and then the dump started. So that's kind of what I've been looking at for the previous bull market. And we can also see the previous bull market before we draw the same pitchfork for this bull market as well. We can also see, we can start with the shift pitchfork, because there's the shift one, and then there's the modify shift, then there's the original. But we can start with the shift one here, and we can see also how the shift one predicted this rally up here. So we got this top here first, Bitcoin corrected, but we never took out these lows. And then when Bitcoin started rallying, we could then switch to the modify shift, which basically predicted the exact top for Bitcoin. So just wanted to cover this quickly here, why I've been using this specific chart here on Bitcoin, the OANDA chart. And for those who have been following me since last year when I started my channel, we've been looking at something very similar. So once again, we can remove the pitchfork from the previous bull market and attach it here to this bull market right now. So we need 3 pivots, and it's very important to stick to the levels. So we want to use the bear market low, the bull market top, and the recent bear market lows. So my old subscribers, you remember we've been looking at this pitchfork basically for this bull run. So again, bear market lows, bull market top, recent bear market lows, and as I said, we are using the shift modify shift. You can start with the shift one, just as we spoke about previous bull run. Bitcoin tends to first hit the shift one here. We can see how algorithms are using the median line. Bitcoin came up to the shift one, we had a small pullback, and then of course we switched to the modify shift. And the modify shift, we can see here, has actually been respected very nicely here. I don't like here in the end how we actually cut through the modify shift, but we can see the first stop here when Bitcoin made an all-time high before the halving, when Bitcoin hit 70k here, and we broke the previous all-time highs here, and we hit the all-time high before the halving. We can see that's where the big algorithm started dumping here, and since then basically Bitcoin went for almost 6 months sideways here. So this modify shift pitchfork did mark a significant top. Later on, I was very skeptical if Bitcoin could actually break this median line again, because we then had this rally here to the upside. We spoke about 90k perhaps being a double top, or perhaps even 100k if we wick through it. So we can see we would have wicked through it and then reversed. The thing that confused me here is that we actually closed above it on the weekly. So we violated this median line here. We can see price actually held up strong, but now we're actually broken below it. So people I got some comments in yesterday's video, people wanted me to jump back to this old pitchfork. Then later on, of course, I said perhaps we can use the C19 lows here instead of the of the original bear market lows, and that would give us a slightly higher target, which is still in play. This pitchfork could still potentially get hit, but which I thought was very interesting is if we keep to the same rules here, basically. So if we use the bear market lows and forget about the C19 lows, which we later on changed, but we have to remember, if you guys remember what I showed you earlier, instead of using the complete bull market top, we can use the top where the algorithm starts selling. So if you guys remember, I just showed you that this was, in my opinion, how the actually top was, quote unquote top, because this was the top where the median line got hit, even though technically Bitcoin made another higher high. So if you use this top here, let's add the magnet tool here on top. If we use this top here on Bitcoin, we can actually see this median line has been even more respected. We actually got two touches of this median line. So we can see here, we had the first touch here when Bitcoin made its first all-time high last year, and then the second touch when we got these weeks through, and then Bitcoin had pulled back. So according to this pitchfork, which I don't really like to readjust the pitchforks, even though I know a lot of you people are agreeing that this is the better top to use, just because our price has been respecting this median line. This would give you a solid case that most likely the top is already in, algorithms have exited the market, and right now it's time for a bear market to start. So we're gonna have to see how this is gonna develop. As I said in the beginning of the video, I'm still feeling bullish here, which we're gonna jump into a second. I still want to show you my original, the one we're looking at right now. So the one we're looking at is, instead of using the bear market lows, we're using the C19 lows, and then we're using the all-time highs and the recent lows. So this is the one basically we've been discussing for the past 4 months here, maybe 5 months on this channel. This is a pitchfork we've been looking at. The problem is, the longer it takes for Bitcoin to chop here, the higher the target is going to be. Back here in January, we were not too far off. It would make sense to Bitcoin to push up to around 140k top there and then entering a bear market. Right now, if we're going to hit this median line, but let's just call it by the end of the year, it's going to be at around 200k. So if we hit this median line by the end of the year, Bitcoin needs to go to 200k, which is of course a possibility. Is it likely? I really don't know, guys. I do like to be more on the conservative side, and I do think 200k is an extreme target. So we have to see. At the moment, it doesn't look too good here. We are below the 0.5 line here. We're gonna need to big momentum here. We need to start breaking the previous all-time highs or getting close to around 100k for then start perhaps calling for this median line. As of for now, it looks difficult for this pitchfork to be valid, and what I mean by valid is basically this median line getting hit. So what I prefer to do right now is more focus on the daily time frame. I want to look at the short time frame right now, and then of course at the stock market. So unless the stock market can do some crazy movements here, and the stock market can have like a big recovery from this recent crash, so then Bitcoin can also snap back, then perhaps this is possible. But as of for now, I'm being careful here. I'm extremely careful, just because, as I said, if we look at this pitchfork here that we have been discussing, either this one or this one here, we can see definitely there are algorithms that have been dumping Bitcoin at these median lines. So time will show. I just want to share with you these pitchforks. You can let me know what you think. I'm personally a bit confused here, in the sense that earlier this year it seemed certain that Bitcoin's going to go to this median line, but right now we're broken down. So I think it's just best to wait here to see further price action or any impulses to the upside before start calling for any higher targets. As I've been saying, I do think we've been saying this for a long time. I do think this median line is very difficult for us to get to, but if we can remain above the 0.5 line here, I think there's a possibility. But for the past few weeks, we've been below this 0.5 line of this pitchfork. So time will show here. Anyways, let's jump into the daily chart here. Then I want to look at the stock market, because the stock market is bouncing nicely here today. So on the daily chart, this is very simple. I try to keep it extremely simple here. We can see here this move up since 69k all the way up to around 90k. Bitcoin just cut through basically price discovery like butter, so there's no real support has been forming here. That's the reason I didn't want to see these lows taken out here that we made last month, because this could allow for them Bitcoin to break down. So 69k is going to be a 69.4, or actually that's a funny number, 69,420. So that would be a strong support here in my opinion. Are we going to get there? I really don't know. If the crash continues in the stock market, I think it's a possibility, but I wouldn't say it's likely here. I do think right now Bitcoin is holding quite strong, especially seeing how much the stock market dropped in the past few days. Bitcoin is basically back here. It was earlier today at 80k. So we need to zoom out here and remember that Bitcoin is at 80,000 US dollars. That's extremely high compared to what the stock market has been doing. Of course, from the highs, if we pull from the all-time highs, Bitcoin is currently down 27%. So we have to see how this is going to develop here. on Bitcoin, but we have this support here. If we come down, I do think this area is gonna provide a strong bounce here on Bitcoin overall. Then of course we can take a look at the liquidation heat map. The liquidation heat map is not showing me anything major here at the moment. We did sweep this liquidity that we were talking about a few days ago. You guys remember we called for 80k. Bitcoin of course went much deeper, and then we bounced back here. So we have to see how this is going to develop. What I do think is more interesting is the open interest. I've been talking about this for a long time, and you're probably getting tired of me speaking about this, but we can continue to see here open interest is making lower lows here. In my opinion, this is extremely bullish. Once again, it means leverage is exiting the market. But once again, we have to remember the recent drop we have seen here on Bitcoin, in my opinion, would not have happened without the stocks dropping. So all the technicals are pointing to that Bitcoin is oversold, that we should see some kind of bounce here soon. But of course, if the stock market decides to crash, and we can see not only the US stock market, we can see worldwide stock markets were looking like they're about to collapse just a few days ago and even yesterday, of course it's going to be difficult for Bitcoin to remain high. So I continue to say here that the open interest actually looks good here, and we can continue to chop, but sooner or later I wouldn't be surprised if we're going to see a big rally or a big spike here on Bitcoin that could take us to even perhaps 90k. So open interest still looking good here in my opinion. Then we'll also this chart here, shout out to Colin Talks Crypto. He been talking about how the M2 money supply is highly correlated with Bitcoin. He's been diving deeper into this, basically saying if you offset the M2 money supply about 108 days, especially lately, we can see how Bitcoin here in orange compared to the M2 money supply, how nicely correlated they are. And we can see here what the M2 money supply is continuing to print basically record highs here. The global liquidity basically has made record highs, and Bitcoin here tends to follow the global liquidity. So even if this doesn't mean that this Bitcoin is just going to continue to follow this just because in the past we've seen correlation. That doesn't mean we're going to continue to see correlation in the future. But I would be extremely surprised if we just see the empty money supply here basically continues to the upside and then Bitcoin just drops lower. That's the reason I still think even if you're bearish, we should see a bounce here on Bitcoin. We should see Bitcoin basically having a bounce here. We can also look at the candlestick chart here. Some kind of reaction from this, all the liquidity that is currently available here. So that's also a reason why I know you guys keep hearing that me saying that I'm bullish here, but it's just wouldn't make sense for Bitcoin to just drop down here and then we see the global liquidity skyrocketing. So I do think it's just more chop here for Bitcoin. We could enter a phase here, more chop, maybe even take out the recent lows, but sooner or later Bitcoin should have at least a relief rally. I'm not saying we're going to go to all-time highs, but it would make sense for Bitcoin to have some kind of relief rally here. So that's the reason why I still remain kind of bullish here. Then of course, before we jump, I want to also discuss the short time frame here on Bitcoin, but before we do that, let's jump into the stock market. So the stock market, as I said, I'm not trying to predict it too much here, because we had this very sharp drop here, and I said I try not to be to draw too many technicals here on the stock market, because just I don't like how sharp the drop is. As we spoke about in yesterday's video, we spoke about the C19 lows to the all-time highs. If we can look here, we spoke about this 0.31 perhaps acting as some support, but nothing is confirmed here yet because we want to see first some green candles coming in. And that's exactly what we saw here yesterday. If you pull from the C19 lows to the all-time highs, the 0.31 Fibonacci has acted as perfect support here on Bitcoin. Another thing that I thought was very interesting is if we draw this pitchfork here, so we can use the previous all-time highs, or I don't know if we can call it previous all-time highs, but basically the top we formed in January 2022 in the stock market, then the bear market lows, and then the recent highs. If we're using the original pitchfork here, we can even remove the Fibonacci here. We can see this median line here has acted as very interesting support here to the dollar. Bitcoin came back, stock market came to the median line and we have bounced from it. And this is also very nice correlation with this 0.31. Once again, guys, I'm not trying to predict the stock market too much, but if the stock market is forming a low here, it would make sense that this low would already be in here. So we can see the median correlation, the 0.31 correlation, and best case here, what I'm seeing is the stock market slowly but surely going to continue to trend to the upside. Once again, guys, it's extreme uncertain. There's a lot of uncertainty right now in the market, and I'm not really trying to predict it too much. But if we would see something like this happening in the stock market, of course, as we know, I think Bitcoin is going to do extremely well, because we know how much Bitcoin still is correlated to the stock market. So we can see, looking at the Bitcoin chart on top. Of course, the bearish scenario is if this crash continues and we just enter a huge correction here, which I do think is unlikely. I do think at least some kind of chop here. These corrections, they take time to play out. So even if we're going to enter a correction, it's just going to happen overnight. So I still think there is room here for Bitcoin to bounce to the upside. But we're going to continue to monitor this stock market chart. I do think it's very interesting. We can even ignore the fib and just look at the pitchfork. Has been very, very nice bounce here. So let's see if the stocks can continue to catch a bit here. I definitely think there's going to be more upside on Bitcoin. So let's jump into the 4-hour or the smaller time frame chart here on Bitcoin. So I thought let's cover this quickly here. So we looked yesterday at the original. You guys remember previously I looked at the shift one here. This was the first area we called for bounce here at 80k, 79, 80k. Bitcoin cut through it. Then we start looking at the original. The original actually held up here very, very nicely here. Yesterday we came down here to the original. I was a bit too early, tried to catch the bottom here, but we went all the way down to the original, and since then Bitcoin has bounced. So for now, Bitcoin doesn't look too bad here to me. As long as we can hold up this low here, we could probably see some more chop and perhaps then a move to the upside. Once again, we need to see more clarity from the stock market. A level I'm looking at here on the 4-hour time frame, which I do think is going to be very, very important, is this supply zone here. So I've drawn this as some kind of supply zone here. We have these few green candles before this big move to the downside, and the supply zone is sitting more or less at exact, let me draw it here. I want to just draw it exact. So the exact area I'm looking at is 82.3k. I think that's going to be heavy resistance. So I would like to see for Bitcoin to have some kind of impulse here to the upside, 82.3k, and from there we have to see. So most likely we're going to see a pullback there, and Bitcoin's going to go to newer lows, or we can see a smaller pullback, and then we can continue a rally to the upside. But as I said, I still think more chop here, more uncertainty in the market. So we need to be patient here. Right now, Bitcoin is dropping slightly as I'm speaking, but it would make sense to me for Bitcoin to come at around 82.3k to grab the liquidity, and then we see from there if Bitcoins continue lower, or we're actually putting in a bottom here on the daily before we also continue higher. Something else we can pay attention to, we're also even above the modified shift here. So on the daily, we're above the modified shift pitchfork as well. So far, Bitcoin is showing some kind of strength here with this big bounce up. But of course, the original is one we want to pay attention to as well. So far, so good. I do think if we can start breaking this outside white line of Bitcoin here, perhaps this could then cause a bullish signal here, and we can move to the upside. Right now, we need to understand Bitcoin is still in this downtrend here. So I'm not going to call for anything higher than 82.3k because I do think that's going to be heavy resistance, but that's the area I'm looking at right now. Of course, also paying attention how the stock market is going to develop. But once again, if the stock market is forming a low here, it would make sense for this low to be here, and then slowly but surely, maybe we can start seeing investors coming back into the market. So that's kind of it for me today, guys. Of course, I know perhaps I didn't give you very, very clear direction what I'm looking at, but to be honest, I'm just looking for more price action here. We want to see the stock market cool off here a bit, calm down a bit before then we start making any crazy predictions, because right now, especially here on the daily, Bitcoin hasn't done a lot. We're still kind of inside this box here, chopping. We're at the lower part of the box, but still chopping here sideways. So thank you so much, guys, for watching this video. Make sure to smash the likes if you enjoy the daily updates. Be inside the Discord. I'll be live there. I've almost been doing live streams there every day. So if you're interested in more, if you're more of an active trader, make sure you check out the Discord. Otherwise, I thank so much. Have a great week, guys. See you again, guys, tomorrow. Bye bye.
Going long from the bottom, short from the top, with medium precision, he just don't stop. Going long from downtown, from the 031, target smash, TP out, and the Cobra's done. Snake and bake, King Cobra.